And that's where our society has gotten to. I want to thank Kelly and Eric for bringing me down here. Like I said to them earlier, though, I wish it had been maybe during the winter months rather than the summer months, but it's a pleasure to be down here. And also, too, and then really want to thank Diane and Bob Baker for their hospitality. They've been absolutely super. A real credit to the state of Texas, as has everyone's been, or Oklahoma. Yeah. You know, I've spoken in Oklahoma a couple times, and every time I talk about how there are differences within Iraq or Afghanistan, how you wouldn't want, if you lived in a certain part, you wouldn't want someone else policing your area. And when I've spoken in Oklahoma a couple times, I always say, you wouldn't want Texas state troopers up here policing Oklahoma. So I understand it's not the, yeah. So my apologies about that. But also too, but everyone's been fantastic. I want to say Ramadan Mubarak to those folks here observing Ramadan. And please excuse the fact that I'll be drinking water, but my voice won't make it through without some occasional sips. So excuse me for that. I'm with the Afghanistan Study Group. We're a collection of foreign policy advocates. We produced a report last year, just about a year ago. You can find it online. It's called the Afghanistan Study Group.org, and our report's there. We also maintain a blog, and we have a host of other resources. I'm with a think tank called the Center for International Policy. We're based out of Washington, D.C., and we primarily work on issues related to national security. So when we get to the question and answer, if you'd like to talk about anything larger with regards to national security or foreign policy, please feel free to ask. As Khalil said, I served in Iraq twice, so very happy to speak about Iraq. We are, if folks are not aware, we have requested to the Iraqi government to remain in Iraq for at least 2 more years with about 10,000 troops. As we get into later in my talk, I'll talk about what you can do to help, you know, with regards to Iraq. You can remind your members of Congress who several years ago were screaming bloody murder about our presence there, that look, this is our chance to get out, and no one is doing anything about it. No one is saying anything about our remaining in Iraq for the foreseeable future. So we can talk about that. Also very happy to talk about defense budget reduction. We spend about $1 trillion a year, give or take a couple $100 billion on security in this country. And I think that's also another issue that is not sparking enough debate, not enough conversation. I thank you guys. I believe there was a big GOP debate tonight out of Iowa. I thank you for choosing this rather than watching the debate. I have a feeling probably not a lot of people, I mean, maybe you're DVRing or TiVoing, but you know, you wonder about that, like how much is going to come up in the sense of honest, real conversation on, we spend $1 trillion a year on security, whether it be the Department of Defense, whether it be on the State Department, USA, Department of Veterans Affairs, the debt on past defense spending, Homeland Security. We spend $1 trillion a year on this. Is that going to have a, you know, the columnist for the Washington Post, Ezra Klein, said it really, really well a couple months ago when he basically described the U.S. federal government as becoming an insurance company with an army. And it's true. That, I mean, so tonight in that debate, are they going to be talking about these things? Are they going to be asking real serious questions and having real serious conversation on these issues? Or is it all just going to pass over into rhetoric? Okay, is it all just going to turn into a tough guy or tough gal type of, we need to fight them over there so we don't fight them here type of thing, which we've heard for so much of these last 10 years. But what I'd like to talk about tonight is Afghanistan. I served there for 5 months as a State Department political officer. Left after that 5 months because I just could no longer support our policy. I found our policy to be counterproductive. I found it not to be in our nation's interest, and I found it to be immoral in many ways. Khalil mentioned earlier what our stated objectives are in Afghanistan and the region, and we do. We have 2 objectives or goals in the region. One is the defeat of Al-Qaeda. and its affiliates, and the other is the stabilization of Pakistan and the safeguarding of its nuclear weapons. Pakistan has approximately 100 nuclear weapons. They're building anywhere between 5 and 15 a year, possibly. They've been to war with India on 4 occasions. As most of you all know, it's the most militarized border in the world, and tensions tend to flare somewhat easily. And I agree with those objectives. The problem is our policy in Afghanistan and the region is not achieving those objectives. Al-Qaeda is not in Afghanistan. They have not been in Afghanistan in any measurable form or in any way that actually means anything since late 2001. The White House said as much on June 21st, the White House admitted this. The counterterrorism coordinator, John Brennan, said, "We have not seen a threat from Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan in 7 or 8 years." Okay? With regards to the stabilization of Pakistan, does anyone here in this room think Pakistan is in a better place now than it was 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago? So we're having it's a counterproductive effect when it comes to Pakistan, and it is having literally no effect on Al-Qaeda because Al-Qaeda is simply not there. When you look at Al-Qaeda, you see a network of individuals and small cells that is loosely connected around the world by an ideology that basically floats, really across the internet as an ideological cloud. One of the things when we see Al-Qaeda operatives and their affiliates, we don't have a common demographic for them. Okay, about the only thing they seem to have in common is not origin, not where they're from, not their skin color, not their financial background, not their mental state, not whether they're married or single, a father or have no children. All we kind of see that connects this roughly maybe 2,000, maybe at best 4,000 people around the world out of a worldwide Muslim population of 1.6 or 1.7 billion is the fact that they're Muslims. Okay? And they adhere to some idea that they want to be part of this big hand movement of history, that they see an epic sweep of history, that they want to be a part of this clash of culture, this clash of civilization, very similar to what that psychopath in Norway felt when he massacred those 90-some-odd people, mostly children, a few weeks ago. Also, too, and we'll get into this later on, it's also similar to a lot of political rhetoric we hear in this country. Okay? This idea of American exceptionalism. It's not much more different, that America has a place in this world, that we're part of the big hand movement of history, that this is part of the epic struggle of mankind. Okay, so you have some political rhetoric in America that roughly, I'm not saying it matches up, but roughly sounds similar to what we can hear from some of the Al-Qaeda adherents. But let's go back a couple of years to where we were in Afghanistan in 2009. President Obama came into office, he campaigned on winning the good war, right? He campaigned on doing what Bush didn't do. Okay, he campaigned on Bush made a mistake, took our eyes off Afghanistan, the right fight, the right war, and invaded Iraq. Okay, I don't think anyone's going to argue that that was a mistake. All right, but the president, black Democrat running against John McCain, the war hero, has to be as tough or tougher. So he promises escalation. He promises that he's going to win this war militarily. He's going to send a couple more brigade combat teams. He's not going to be afraid to violate the sovereignty of other nations in order to make America more secure. And he comes into office, and nearly immediately, he escalates the war. Nearly immediately, he approves a plan to send over 20,000 more troops to Afghanistan. And then what's kind of unnoticed is that over that period of time between that 20,000 troop increase and the troop increase in December that he authorized on December 1st, 2009 at West Point of 30,000 more, somehow we slipped another 12,000 in there as well. Okay, because there's really only 2 publicly stated troop increases, one of 20 and one of 30. But somehow he's increased our presence there by about 65,000. Okay, so over 2009, you see our troop levels go from roughly 35,000 to about 101, 102,000. Okay, in the course of the first year of the president's time there in terms of actually executing that. And so what has that accomplished? Well, you know, you have claims of progress, okay? You have PR statements coming from the Pentagon as fast as possible saying how we're winning this war. But when you look at it, Afghanistan is a disaster. Okay, militarily, at best, you can cite we're in stalemate, at best. We've lost about almost 300 Americans this year in Afghanistan. Over 3,000 Americans have been wounded in Afghanistan. So we have a ratio of 10 to 1 in terms of wounded to killed. And that's for a number of reasons. And thank God for that, but it kind of masks the level of violence that's there, okay? It's the deadliest, in terms of casualty numbers, it's roughly on pace, on track. It's actually a little ahead in terms of total casualties of where we were in Afghanistan this time last year. And last year, of course, being the deadliest year, the most violent year of the war for American forces. For Afghan civilians, it's already going to be the deadliest year of the war. Okay, the numbers are well above what it's been in previous years. You see almost no effect on the insurgency. If anything, you've had the opposite effect. Rather than hammering these guys and driving them to the negotiating table, okay, rather than weakening them and making people not want to join them because that was the losing side, and your only choice was either going to be killed or be put into Bagram, you see an insurgency that has expanded. You see an insurgency that, where last year, or a couple of years ago, it really was confined roughly to the south and east of the country. Now, these last 2 years, it has spread to the north and the west of the country, and they conduct high-profile attacks in the urban areas really whenever they'd like to. And what you've gotten out of that is you have an insurgency whose financial logistics and operational chains are completely intact or stronger. Does anyone here know how many times a day coalition forces find improvised explosive devices or roadside bombs in Afghanistan? How many times a day we find them in Afghanistan? 53 times a day. Okay? That was a record in June. Over 1,600 IEDs were found. And those are the ones we found. Okay? So you cannot say that, and the previous record was 1,500, then 1,400, then 1,300. So we're not having an effect on the insurgency of weakening them. The insurgency has just grown stronger. We've seen insurgency engage in a very effective assassination campaign. And this ties into the weakness of the political system we've put in place in Afghanistan. If anyone here thinks that the political system in Afghanistan is a democracy, okay, and that's representative of all Afghans, and it treats all Afghans equally, and that the folks we are supporting in Karzai's government are wearing white hats and are believers in women's rights and democracy, you're just mistaken, and you're completely wrong. The Karzai government is composed of drug lords, warlords, some of whom are war criminals, child rapists. It's a government that has a shell of democracy or a veneer of democracy over it, and the skeleton is individual power brokers that are connected through a corrupt patronage network. So what the insurgency has done, and so of course that does not engender support of the population. If anything, it pushes people towards the insurgency. Okay, and so what we do, we try and everyone's familiar with the kill and capture campaign we're conducting, the night raids we're conducting in Afghanistan, which basically violates Afghans in their home, violates their sense of security, frightens them, pushes them to the insurgency. That campaign, while it has been at an incredible tempo, while we are executing raids a dozen a night sometimes, the insurgency just replaces those people it loses. Or because we got this guy, these 5 or 6 guys are now going to join the insurgency because they don't like their village raided at night by foreign forces and helicopters. Now, the insurgency, though, runs their own assassination campaign. And again, it's against this government that is really just a collection of individual power.